Hey, welcome back to the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge, and today we have Iron Man Armored Adventures. This is not a Disney cartoon. This is not a Cartoon Network tune. This is a Nicktoon series, which didn't even realize that there were Marvel stuff on Nickelodeon, but that's the case. This is a series. It ran for 2 seasons, and it was from 2008 to 2010. When I first saw this, I thought we were seeing the much earlier, like 90s Iron Man, but I think we already saw that. Yeah, I think we did. Anyway, it's been a while. It's been almost 2 years now since we started this. So, yeah, this tells a very different origin story and a very different Tony Stark. This one does not have a goatee. This is a teenager. He's best friends with Rhodey, uh, who will maybe eventually become War Machine. I don't know. But he's a kid whose father's still alive in a modern era, uh, where Stark technology has improved things. The buildings look more futuristic in, I guess, in New York where they are. I don't know what's wrong with my hair. Good grief. Anyway, um, so yeah, he's basically 15, 16. I have no idea. Maybe that around that age. He's best friends with Rhodey. He is too rich and too smart to go to school, and yeah, because fucking a normal school teach him. He's beyond compute even college age studies, and he spends most of his day just inventing and trying to outdo his own father, who he's best friends with. Him and Howard are getting along great, unlike Tony Stark of the MCU, who is at least until Endgame, was not reconciled very well with his father and how losing him and his mother when he was much younger. They're rich beyond words, so they make bets on dumb little things, playful bets of $1 million each to on stuff. Anyway, they they're trying to outdo each other in technology and things, and they don't use it for weapons, unlike the Tony Stark of the MCU. He doesn't get trapped in a cave and held by terrorists and builds an suit of armor to escape. None of that happens. He is a teenager, and on a flight somewhere with his dad. Dad gets a call from Stain, and Stain is just a pain in the butt. He's always trying to tell Stark to do different things to make weapons and things like that. And he's like, I'm going to have to get rid of that guy. I'm going to have to fire him eventually. He's just trouble. Well, Dad takes a call in one part of the plane, the private jet. Tony wanders back to a different part of the jet, and it suddenly blows up. What we find out is that Tony is the sole survivor of that crash, and Howard apparently dies. And we pick this up weeks or months later. I'm not really sure how long it is. I must have looked away if they gave us time. He's living with Rhodey and his mom, and he's forced to go to school, where he goes and he pretty much outdoes any of his teachers. The teachers don't know half of what he knows. It's kind of embarrassing. But he soon realizes that Stain might have had something to do with his father's death, and he comes up with this secret project that he's been working on for a while, the Iron Man armor. So Iron Man, Iron Man armor. So he puts that on. He suddenly becomes a phenomenon, and I only watched the first 2 episodes, so you basically just get the establishment of his raison d'être. By the way, this is also made by a French animation group. This is even though it's created by Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost, who many comic book people will know as they wrote X-Men for a while, X-Men books, co-created X-23, Laura, the all new Wolverine, at one point in the comics. And yeah, here's it's just a weird thing, because I would give you a list of names that you'd go, oh my gosh, those people, that person. None of these names, while I'm sure they're very formidable in their voice talent, they're not part of the normal Marvel or Disney list of names. I don't recognize any of them, which is very strange. It's a totally different pool because Disney tends to use a lot of the same uh, voices, actors over and over again. And this, since this is 2008, yeah, this is right around the same time that the movie came out, the MCU was launching. So even if the Iron Man movie had failed, can you imagine that? Uh, this would have still been on television and would have been something kind of historic. So it would have been its own thing. Maybe this would have taken off and lasted a decade or more, and the MCU might have not existed. Who knows? The animation, like I said, is by a French team. I think they do a lot of other stuff. I think they might it might be the same people that do Miraculous. I am not sure. Don't take my word for that. But there's a number of we've seen French deals with French animation teams throughout Disney and Marvel in some of their later stuff. I think there's a Spider-Man cartoon that's very much like this. It's a 3D animated. It's rotoscoped. It's a very soft and colorful, um, somewhat stiff in its movements. Uh, it's very economic in its movements of people just talking or walking. Most of the more dynamic animation is left for flying and fighting and shooting lasers and big robots and things like that. And yeah, so it's kind of it's a you'll recognize that style. That there's a certain uh, style that's pervasive in certain types of animation. And this is very much, by the way, more pointed towards kids. Yeah, it's going to be it's something you can appreciate it as an adult, but it's mostly much simpler. Meant to be something that appeals to kids. He's not a weapons making alcoholic who hates his father. He is just the opposite. Beyond Rhodey as his best friend, we get to meet a very different Pepper Potts. She is a daughter of an FBI agent or FBI person, and uh, she exists to provide exposition in her first appearance. She basically just spits out everything that we don't already know about Tony Stark and his character because she is read up on him because her parent or dad, I guess, knows everything, and she gets to read secure files, which is really weird. She tries to help out with a number of different escapades, but she also doesn't know that he's Iron Man. So there's still that secret agent thing. This is very much at its start the Spider-Man story, but if Spider-Man was rich and already had and only had one parent who then also died. So he's completely orphaned. Not he has no Aunt May or anything else except for, well, maybe Rhodey's mom, but I don't know how she figures into things beyond giving him a home. And by the way, when Howard dies, of course, Stain takes over the company, and that makes things very difficult for Tony, and that makes Tony want to figure out what's going on and if he was involved in the death of his father, and potentially his if he hadn't survived. There's a sub story, also there's a B story that will eventually, actually by the second episode comes to somewhat of a head when we get to meet the Mandarin. The Mandarin, which is a very different type of character than we see in the comics or in the films, obviously. This was a Mandarin that existed before, of course, Trevor or the Mandarin in Shang-Chi shows up in the MCU. So he's like a samurai Darth Vader kind of costume, and he's collecting rings, one which Howard has and one which he already has, but somehow that ring moved from Howard to Stain. So anyway, they potentially have tremendous power, and we kind of know what the rings are all about in a sense, but this is a very different. They're finger rings, not arm rings like in Shang-Chi. So yeah, it's a very interesting take on things. And of course the comics also had finger rings, and the Mandarin was very much a stereotype. So I think they're trying to avoid that for the most part. There's still, I don't know. You'll have to see. For me, this is not my kind of thing. I probably won't get into it. It doesn't have that weird, uncomfortable retro feel that the '90s cartoon has, which makes you go, I think I'm gonna hate watch this, or at least I'm curious as to what they're gonna get weird about in that. This one, it looks pretty. It's the characterization isn't too incredibly deep. The dialogue is not too incredibly complex. I think it's because also it would be available in French and English, and the translation has to be there, I guess. Within it has to be animated properly that can handle multiple languages. Either way, it's all right for what it is, but it's not something I'm going to be like, oh my god, I got to see the next episode. So, but yeah, if you're an Iron Man fan, if you got a kid who's an Iron Man fan, it's one more thing to show them. They might find this one more interesting than the '90s version. But yeah, give it a shot if that's your thing. For me, not so much. But I have the MCU and comic books. Let's pick tomorrow's episode.
620.
620. Smudge. 620. Oh, I should have known. Actually, we haven't had one in a while, I guess, since the new quarter. And this quarter is almost up. It's time for another one of these movies, and one of our favorite fairies, pixies, Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue. Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue on the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. I'll see you back here tomorrow with that. Hang with Tink and the gang. See you then. Bye.